Humboldt Institute, the Interdisciplinary Institute for Marijuana Research. And we have with us today our fourth speaker for this year's speaker series for the 2013-14 speaker series. And in a moment, I'm going to introduce Nathan Donahoe. You may have noticed when you came in, there were around the room these small little cards. Those are actually donation forms. And in order to bring folks like Nathan here and other people, the university has been kind, but we're hoping to solicit some donations from folks for our speaker series. If you're inclined to do so, please pick one up and or get in contact with one of us. Nathan Donahoe. Actually, I think right now we should introduce Josh for our next speaker. He has a few words.
Yeah, hello everyone. I just wanted to tell you quickly about our fourth, perhaps last speaker of this academic year. We'll let you know about if there's going to be a sixth one. Dr. Sunil Agarwal is going to be coming on April 21st, and that'll be on a Monday. Normally these are on Tuesdays. Monday, April 21st. The title of his talk is Cannabinoid Medical Science and Political Ecology, Psychoactive Substances, and Mental Distress. I'll just circulate this nice colorful poster. It's not out yet, and you can all take a look at it, and I hope you will join us for that talk in April.
Thanks, Josh. Okay, I'd like to now introduce Nathan Donahoe. Nathan first contacted me about a year and a half ago when our institute went public and we got chartered. And ever since then, he's been a very enthusiastic supporter of us. And he's also helped me personally in our institute make research connections. As a direct result of working with Nathan, I've worked on submitting a NIH grant, and we'll see how that goes. I've been put in touch with researchers and across the U.S. And in Southern California. And just by way of an introduction here, Nathan is a member of, he's here as a member of the Cannabis Consulting Group. He's also a board member and chair of the Medical Cannabis Committee for the West Los Angeles Neighborhood Council. That's an elected position. He's also on the oversight board of the National Institute of Health's Cannabis, Health, and Young Adult Study. He was a big part of working on that. But I'll turn it over to Nathan. Welcome, and
thank you,
looking
Eric.
forward to a great talk.
Thank you, everyone, so much for having me here today. First, I'd really like to thank Eric and Josh. HIMR is the first marijuana institute in the United States. And let's let that sink in a bit. Right now, we're sitting where the only marijuana institute in the United States is. So I just really like to commend Josh and Eric for having the foresight and the innovation. They care enough about this campus to prepare for the future. So can you please just give a round of applause? Thank you. Cannabis growing got started in Humboldt, but it may not always be here and forever. And that's what we'll talk about during the presentation. It's a little, yeah.
Sorry, the technology.
Hello. Yeah. Is that okay? Yeah, can I just try my oratory voice? I've taken singing lessons.
Try that?
Can we try that, guys? All right, thanks.
Okay.
Okay, great. Great, so a couple things, just to get clear all the different titles and organizations I'm a part with, because there's a lot. I am being sponsored today by Cannabis Consulting Group. Cannabis Consulting Group is a really great cannabis think tank based out of Santa Monica, California. And the whole point of it was that it wanted to become an educational resource for the cannabis industry and universities. We all know right now it's really hard to get the good quality information about cannabis and what's going on. So they've been nice enough to let me come up here, and they also are a bunch of experts and scientists, and they always let me text them and bug them with all my cannabis questions. So just thank you, Cannabis Consulting Group. I really appreciate it. A little bit about me. I originally got involved in the medical cannabis industry about 10 years ago. I was working as a private health chef. Actually, I went to school in Humboldt. Does anyone here remember Hartwood Institute up in Paul? You remember Hartwood? So I'm a Hartwoodie. I studied with Paul Pitchford, and that's where I first got my first experience with cannabis. At Hartwood Institute, it was at a place called Island Mountain up above Garberville. And the first day I got there, part of the orientation, they said, okay, now whatever you do, just remember, we have neighbors, and if you kind of walk off the property and go on their property, they may shoot at you. So coming from LA, that was a big difference experience, and that's where I got my first experience with cannabis. When I came back down to LA, I started working with cancer patients and working with drug addicts at some of the rehabs in Malibu. And that's where I started working with doctors and learning more about cannabis and how it works with cancer. What really disturbed me at that time was back in the day, a doctor would just say, okay, here's a recommendation for cannabis. Good luck. And these cancer patients and other sick people, they'd be left to fend for themselves. And as a health chef who tried to always go to the farmers markets and find the pesticide-free and chemical-free food, it became a natural thing for me. The tomato's a plant, cannabis is a plant. If I'm good at finding the good food for my patients, then I need to learn more about this medicine that even doctors don't really realize. And that's when this whole amazing journey started of educating myself on industry. I learned how to grow in Northern California. And then when I came back down to LA, I started working with collectives, trying to get high quality medicine to the patients. Unfortunately, at that time, not a lot of collectives weren't willing to create standards and quality control. So I ended up working with one collective called Herbal Cure. And through Herbal Cure, it's where I've got a lot of my industry experience and how I ended up becoming an elected official for LA City. And if you don't know what an elected official is, or what a neighborhood council is, basically in LA City, they have big council districts, and a city council person will represent each district. I'm part of a neighborhood council, which means I'm an advisory body to LA City. Specifically, I advise the city on West Los Angeles. It is a grassroots position. It's very local. I only represent about 30,000 people, and not that many people really voted. There's a lot of apathy. But with it, I get an official city business card. And with it, I get to take ethics classes, and I get to represent LA City as an elected official, which has got me a lot of experience and helped me become a part of a lot of organizations. I also sit on the board for a National Institute of Drug Abuse study on medical cannabis in young adults in LA City. It's with Children's Hospital, USC, and Drexel University. So even though I'm kind of a platypus, I wear a lot of different hats, that's what I think makes me different and helps me relate to a lot of different people. Because I'm a farmer. My first cannabis I ever grew was Afgoo. Do we have any farmers here? Did anyone ever grow Afgoo? All? I'm also a patient. I've been a patient for 10 years. And then also, I work in policy. So I feel all that really helps me give a well-rounded view. A couple of things. So again, I'm not a college graduate. I'm a college dropout. So, and hey, going to college is great. And if I could go to college, I would definitely go to Hemmer. What I'm excited about, what I can bring to the table is my industry experience and behind the scenes experience. So this presentation, I'm not going to be doing a lot of complicated analysis, a lot of stats and things like that. I'm going to leave that to people who've devoted their lives there at higher education, like Eric and Josh, as well as other members of Cannabis Consulting Group. That's what they're best at. So with this whole presentation was made on my iPhone 4. I'm a big fan of social media and Instagram, so I hope you like it. Okay. So Herbal Cure was a medical cannabis collective that I first got involved with in LA. And what was great about Herbal Cure and how it was different from other collectives in the industry was that it was a collective made by farmers, for farmers and patients. So the whole point of it was that they wanted to make sure that quality medicine that was safe would get to patients, and they would get the consultations they needed. Back in LA at the time, it was really more of this fast food mentality of just, get as many people through the doors as you can. Who knows where the medicine came from? I just met you, we'll put it on the shelf. And during that time, it really upset me because, like I said, a lot of these sick people, they need to get quality medicine and they weren't really getting it. So with Herbal Cure, I was able to get some quality industry experience. The owners were graduates. One of them was a graduate of Cornell University Agriculture and Life Sciences program. So he had some background. I just really liked this picture. As a volunteer for the collective for my medicine, I helped work on the marketing packet. This was a chandelier that we found in I believe, it was in a Parisian pawn shop. It's Murano glass, it was Italian chandelier. And I just love it because it just really showed the wanting to create a nice, comfortable experience with art for patients instead of just sending them into a box to get their medicine. Herbal Cure was geneticists and breeders and would actually create certain strains to work with certain medical conditions, which I really liked. At the time, we were really ahead of our time in the industry because back then, no farmers were really contracted with collectives. It worked on more of a vendor model, where does anyone know what a vendor model is in the cannabis industry? The vendor model is basically the middleman model, where usually there's a farmer up in Northern California or anywhere, and then they have their friend or middleman or vendor pick up the cannabis and then distribute it to the collectives in LA. We were farmers ourselves, so we wanted to contract farmers and be able to, create a good actual career for them in cannabis. So we were one of the first people to actually create contracts and transport agreements. So if they did get pulled over, or if law enforcement did stop them, they weren't just left hung out to dry. We would actually support our farmers and stick up for them. And this one of the contracts was one of it. So this is really good. Who was I talking about? I was talking about research earlier. So this is just really good research and to see what the different types of collectives are doing, like the vendor model, and to more patient cultivator contracted model. Here's West LA. I told you I represent West Los Angeles Neighborhood Council. Today I am representing myself, but this is the community I help serve. All right. So now, the Wild West of weed. The green rush of LA started in about August 2007. Now back before that, there weren't that many collectives in Los Angeles. I think there was only about 4. But then they slowly began increasing. Every month, new ones would pop up, a little bit more. And it happened slowly enough. So the city, law enforcement, everyone kind of knew it was there, but they didn't really jump on it that quickly. Until August 2007, when there was about 186 collectives in LA. At that time, in the industry, I was speaking to some people about economics of cannabis. Again, I'm not an economist, I leave that to Eric, but I do have the industry experience. Indoor cannabis was ranging from about $4,000 to $5,200 a pound. And then greenhouse and outdoor cannabis was ranging from about $3,000 to $3,800 a pound. And again, at that time, it was more of a vendor model where people would come down and bring their cannabis. This is the interim control ordinance. It's actually a pretty boring legislation. But basically, the whole point of it was that all these collectives are popping up. We don't know what to do as a city. Remember, back then, medical cannabis was so new. Legislators and policymakers had no idea how to deal with it. It's a completely strange animal. Policymakers and legislators, they didn't even want to mention the word cannabis because no one wants cannabis collectives to open up on their watch, and no one wants cannabis collectives to have, or as an elected official, a lot of them do not want to have on their record supporting or promoting cannabis legislation back then. Because then when they try to get their new appointments and new seats, there was a fear among elected officials that then this would haunt them. Like, oh, you're the politician that, passed this pot shop law that then, turned LA into a mess. So at this time, this seemed to be LA City's way of getting control of the situation. But as we'll find out, it didn't really work. June 2009, the hardship exemption. So this is about a couple years later, and during that whole time, they were still trying to figure out and iron out the bugs among the interim control ordinance. Even though they created it, more and more collectives kept on opening up to about 700 total at this time. I also like including some of the marketing from some of the trade magazines. This was one of the most popular marketing. We had some sociology people here today. 4-gram eighths for returning patients. So normally an eighth is 3.5, but when there's 700 plus collectives, how do you stand out among the crowd? So here's one of their marketing things. Indoor cannabis then dropped to $3,800 to $4,800 a pound. And greenhouse outdoor dropped about $2,800 to $3,500 a pound. Now, why is this happening? Why does the price keep dropping when more and more collectives keep opening up? We will find out. Green Oasis, this was a dispensary that ended up suing LA City with the hardship exemption. Now, if you don't know what a hardship exemption, basically, when they created the interim control ordinance to control all these collectives, legally, they had to put in a hardship exemption. Now, the hardship exemption basically says that if you're one of the 100 and legal 86, you can stay. If you open up afterwards, you gotta go. Except if you have filed a hardship exemption application with the city. The hardship basically, the federal government sent my landlord a letter and I had to move, or some other reason. But this is where we really see the spirit of cannabis entrepreneurship in LA. Whether good or bad, however you feel about it, this was the loophole that enabled all of the collectives to balloon and open up, as we'll just see. Here's an example of a hardship application. Now you think hardship, I'm trying to open a business, had this hardship, something's wrong. What happened is that this is an example of the details they would use to remain open and not be shut down, the hardship exemption. A lot of collectives would work with lawyers. This lawyer, Stuart Ricklin, represented hundreds of collectives. And he would charge them thousands of dollars to copy and paste his paperwork and submit it to the city. Now, a lot of these paperworks were just simple jargon. We're having hardship because there's no federal law that permits the use of cannabis. So it didn't really seem it would really hold up, but it actually did. Here's another example. This is the applicant's hardship. Applicant just became aware of the need to register with the city and is in full compliance with registered permits and documents. Applicant asked for council's approval. So this person's hardship was simply they didn't know they had to file. And it seems silly, but it did work and allowed them to open up. So what we're seeing a lot at this time is the Legal 186, a group of collectives that were around for a while that then started differentiating themselves from, they're called the post-ICO or hardship collectives. The ones who then opened up afterwards and were more in threat by the city of getting kicked out. But the pre-ICO ones were considered safe at the time. Now again, I'm a college dropout, but I've been able to do a lot of really good industry research, and I've had a lot of experience as an elected official. And here's an example of a business card that I had from one of my stakeholders in my district. This was a 17-year-old child. And this 17-year-old child loved cannabis. He loved it so much because it helped him with his medical conditions. But he also loved it because he was an entrepreneur. He's 17 years old, and he knew that he wanted a career in cannabis. So he created Blissed Out Bakery. And his goal at 17 years old was to bake brownies out of his mom's kitchen and then go around to all the collectives and then try to sell them. And I feel conflicted on that because at one point, you've got to admire someone who has a passion for something, right? Someone who's an entrepreneur and wants to do something. But then it scared the bejesus out of me of this 17-year-old kid going around trying to sell cannabis to these collectives. A lot of these collectives weren't necessarily professional cannabis healthcare people. We know that a lot of the growers, still stayed growing at the farms, and then a lot of the dealers at the time ended up opening up the shop. So I was really nervous about him going around talking with people who were possibly engaged in criminal activity. I was able to talk to his parents and get him out of it, but this is what was going on back then. The city, the district attorney, the city council, they were helpless at the time while all this was going on. So my goals are public health and safety. Working with cancer patients, nothing upsets me more than thinking of sick people getting poisoned. Patients are not for profit. They should get the medicine they need. So this was one of the papers that I submitted to LA City. I called it the green paper. At the time, there's all these white papers going on. The California Police Chiefs Association had their white paper. Cannabis is evil. Collectives are evil. They all should be shut down. So at that time, I wanted to give a voice of reason to the city of LA. Next came another ordinance, which didn't really work. In that ordinance, they were trying to shut down all the other collectives. But Green Oasis, that dispensary I showed you before, sued with the hardship exemption. And because they sued with that hardship exemption, the judge granted them an injunction against LA City. I'll read it a bit. Judge issues injunction against LA's medical marijuana law. The ruling finds the law's provision outlawing all dispensaries except those that registered under the moratorium unconstitutional. It leaves the city with little power to control pot shops. City officials vow to quickly address the concerns. So basically, this judge's ruling created about a 3-year period of cannabis chaos that lasted until about 2014. And ironically, in true fashion of how the government loves to work, at the same time they're trying to shut everyone down, what else were they trying to do? Tax them. And I remember at the time, it was a very chaotic, stressful time, but we would just laugh at, okay, 1 minute they want to shut us down, and then the other minute they're trying to get all this money from us. So that kind of just shows how even the city wasn't really on board and how confused they were at the time. In order to fund general municipal services, including but not limited to such matters as police protection and crime suppression services, fire prevention and suppression services, parks and recreation facilities, and general improvements throughout the city, shall a tax be authorized on marijuana collectives, $50 for 1,000 of gross receipts, recognizing that the sale of marijuana is illegal. So basically, do we see anything here that talks about anything going to fund public health for the new cannabis industry in LA. You know, making sure that the medicine is quality controlled, or making sure that patients, you know, are safe, or anything about public safety to making sure that the cannabis isn't being grown, you know, in the residential neighborhoods and causing fires. No, at this time, the city, like many other municipalities around the country, were taking a backwards approach to regulation. Now, with the experts that I work with in environmental health, I work with some environmental health people in LA County. They told me that the reason why a lot of this isn't working is because they're regulating the distribution before the production. And normally when a new commodity is on the market or a new product comes on the market, you always regulate the production first. But because these other elected officials and policymakers tended to focus more on profits instead of public health, and they tend to listen not to real experts and advisors who actually have like university education or more science backgrounds, this is why a lot more problems are being caused. Now we get to 2010 to 2013. And during this presentation, I wanted to give everyone as much of a feel of what it was like to be in LA as possible. At that time, so what I did is I went on Instagram and I data mined. So these are actual photos taken from patients of different dispensaries in LA, all the ones you see. This one was called Kind for Cures, KFC. And what was really interesting about this one is that they literally took over an old KFC fast food restaurant. Right? I mean, isn't that great? I mean, it horrifies me that, you know, they did that, but the marketing, oh my gosh, the entrepreneurship. At the time, they literally had the Colonel Sanders logo still there. So people would go there expecting chicken and would maybe get something else if they were also patient. And also back then, I mean, look at the co-branding. I mean, do you think South Park approved that photo on there? No. But is South Park going to then sue a cannabis collective and get all that negative publicity? No. So this is the fascinating part of the cannabis entrepreneurship that I really love to hate, is seeing how cannabis collectives use so much mainstream marketing just flagrantly because they know that nothing would happen if no one would catch them or do anything. Again, more cannabis marketing, free gram for all first-time patients with a $45 minimum donation. And then again, every year, more and more medical cannabis states were opening up. More and more entrepreneurs, more and more farmers are joining the movement. It's becoming more and more of a buyer's market. Before, indoor cannabis, I believe I said, is about 4,500 to 5,200. Look how much it's dropped. Now indoor cannabis was about 32 to 3,800. Greenhouse, outdoor, 25 to 32, when before it was about, I think, 32 to 4. 800 plus collectives. Now, I want to kind of get some more feedback from people in the audience. Did anyone hear at the time about the whole more collectives in Starbucks thing? Or is that just like an LA thing? Well, what did you hear about?
I read it in a media article claiming that there was more dispensaries than Starbucks.
More dispensaries than Starbucks. Did anyone else hear about that? It was on NPR. The Wild West of weed. At this time, it seemed like the LA was the model for what you do not do to regulate cannabis. And that's how the media really brought it into the public consciousness. 800 plus collectives? No, there are more collectives than places where you could get a really expensive cup of coffee. All right. So as an industry person, a lot of times I would read the LA Gem, which is a Los Angeles Journal education on medical marijuana. And this journal is a fascinating place to get some good information about the industry. So these are the faces of cannabis healthcare in LA at the time. Sendog, I believe, is he from Cypress Hill? I forget, he's from some rap group. I don't know if anyone listens to him. But Sendog and the Happy Ending Girls. He operated a collective in Chinatown, which I guess hence the name The Happy Ending because of the connection with the massage parlors. Again, we see the marketing. Can anyone tell me what type of demographic this might cater to? Right? Young males. Young males, maybe we're on the economic spectrum. We pay your ride on the Metro Gold Line. Right? Oh, and I believe, I forget the name of this drink, but it was some type of I forget the name of it. But I pulled up this picture because this one always stuck out in my mind. Because when I'm trying to talk sense to people about cannabis and who was in charge of it at the time, I just say these were the faces of cannabis healthcare. Now, maybe all these ladies, were scientists and researchers. And this was how they paid for their college. Maybe Sendog has a background in healthcare. Or maybe not. More marketing and branding. Now, again, to make this presentation, I'm a real big fan of social media and using the latest cell phone apps. This app I'm using is called Pick, Play, Post. It's the #1 most downloaded app on iTunes. And I really like it because, when I came here today, am I just going to give a boring old PowerPoint presentation where I just go and I read off a prompter? Or am I going to really try to, bring the experience of what LA was like? And with this, we have not only the branding and the advertisements at the time, but look at the juxtaposition of the media articles. Pot shops gone wild. Eagle Rock community leaders ask U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder to crack down on dispensaries in the community. Hi. And at the same time, a federal about-face on marijuana. New Justice Department guidelines order federal drug agents to cease charging patients, caregivers, or suppliers who are conforming with state law. So at the time, again, I was just constantly being torn. The owners of Herbal Cure, my collective, were always being confused because every day we had no idea what would happen. Are we going to be shut down one day? Are we going to be open the next day? Are we allowed to open or are we supposed to close? It seemed like every day it would change. Has anyone seen the iconography of the neon pot leaf signs? Does anyone remember those? Do you have those up here in Humboldt? Oh, no, that's more of an LA thing. Well, if anytime you come down to LA, and I hope you do, and I hope you reach out to me, because I'd love to meet up with you and educate you more on cannabis. But in LA, this became one of the symbols of a shop, the neon pot leaf in the window. Again, here we see more co-branding. Did Obama approve his image in supporting cannabis? No. Did the people get away with it? Yes. This is one of my favorite doctors, Dr. Sonia Patel. She was, I believe, board certified in family medicine. That is a board certified family medicine doctor. Doc 420. At the time, she actually was my doctor for a time, because at the time, I couldn't go to my regular doctor. So do we see kind of the chaos and craziness here? It's patients need medicine, but they can't go to the regular doctor. Why? Because the regular doctor is afraid. The regular doctor is afraid of being labeled a pot doc. And patients are afraid to then talk to their doctors. Now, she actually was a really good doctor. When I walked into her waiting room, she actually gave me a really good 10 to 15 minute exam. She cared about me. She asked me good questions. I've been to other doctors where they didn't do it. But at the time, it was just really funny to me, the marketing, the branding that she chose to do. She became known as like the sexy pot doc. And we'll see a couple more. So at this time, it started getting a little more sad for me because this is when you really started seeing the potential for cannabis, especially for children. People here know about CBD, cannabidiol, pretty much. I'll talk about it a little bit. Basically, cannabis is a wonderful plant that can produce a variety of chemicals. It traditionally has been bred for a high THC content because generally that is what the market has wanted, right? It's been a black market industry, and you always just wanted the strongest stuff, the strongest medicinal effect or the strongest recreational effect. But cannabis also produces cannabidiol, CBD, which many of us probably know actually doesn't have a psychoactive effect. With studies they're doing, they're finding that it actually can have an anti-anxiety effect, anti-inflammatory, and they're saying potential anti-tumor and anti-cancer. Has anyone, obviously people have been hearing a lot about Charlotte's Web and children using it for seizures. Has anyone heard about that? Right? Now we're seeing that people are actually having some good experiences with CBD and things like that. I remember what happened. I think in February, the Florida State Legislature even passed a Charlotte's Web bill, which was based upon early stories of children using cannabis and CBD for things like cancer and seizures. But then what do we see? Do we see all of LA, supporting medical cannabis? Going, hey, maybe we should study this more. Talk with researchers and scientists because we're hearing, actually good responses from people using it. No, at the time, they're still shutting them down. Clearing away the pot stores, one raid at a time. Responding to citizen complaints, a plainclothes team of narcotics officers makes Eagle Rock a focal point. Now, I remember when I was working at my collective at the time, it was a very stressful time because how do you stop yourself from getting shut down as a collective? It seemed very difficult at the time to figure out what the rhyme and reason was. Is it because you advertised? Is it, because you're just passing out coupons and advertising? Maybe not, because Sendog and the Happy Ending Girls were still open. Or maybe it was because of citizen complaints. A lot of the bad operators were getting a lot of complaints from Eagle Rock at the time. And that did seem to help from the community, as evidenced by the plainclothes team of narcotics officers who go and shut them down. And I actually sit on some advisory boards with some LAPD officers, and it was really great to be on these boards, being a patient, being a grower, and being activists, to be able to talk with LAPD and just dialogue with them. And also just hear what their stories are in general. And at that time, from what my LAPD contact was telling me, and even now, again, a lot of these people weren't professional cannabis healthcare providers. But I say that, but we've got to step back for a second because that doesn't mean they were bad people, though. A lot of them were entrepreneurs, and they would have loved to have had, if there was a degree in cannabis or if there was like a legitimate way in the industry they could make money, they probably would have done that. Some of them would have done that. But no, the city and the government, as we see, has been doing it for years, has been forcing a lot of these entrepreneurs and forcing a lot of industry people into the black market, into the shadows. Like my 17-year-old patient. People did not have an outlet to express their passion for the industry and to support their families and create a livelihood. But my LAPD contact was telling me that nearly every collective he went to, some type of criminal activity was going on. They would show up, he has his tattoos and his piercings. He goes, hey, can I have an eighth of that OG Kush? And they give him the eighth of the OG Kush. And then he'd also say, and do you have some heroin as well? Surprisingly, he got a lot of heroin from these collectives. Surprisingly, they were able to buy dozens of pounds out the back door. So, as a patient and as a farmer, as someone in the industry, I'm really glad I got the opportunity to be in dialogue with LAPD and seeing this. That a lot of these cannabis collectives didn't really have the patient's best interests at heart. And a lot of them really were fronts for criminal activity. Now, not all of them were. Like I said, there were a lot of really good collectives. But how do you tell? And as we'll see as we go along a little farther, the city definitely had trouble vetting them. Oh, also a little bit more branding and advertising. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, free joint with donation of $35. And we'll start to see as more and more collectives open up, more and more types of advertising, it gets bigger and bigger. 2 free joints, a free edible, a free eighth, bring a friend, get more. I remember on 420, April 20th, that's when all the cannabis collectives, a lot of them would just give away free cannabis. People would be lining up around the block to get their free eighth of cannabis. The marijuana doctor. This is a sign for a doctor, which I believe is in Venice Beach. You have cannabis doctors up here too, right? Can you tell me a little bit about your cannabis doctors up here too? I heard you have some really good, legitimate ones. Does anyone here have a doctor up here? Yeah?
We have quite a few, and their price is not $60. Probably the one that's regarded as the most skeptical by some people is one that you go in and they have you on television. So he's doing Skyping with you. That's probably the only one that I know of. The rest of them
Skyping.
are really trying, they require your records. They're trying to get your records, and they have meetings with you for quite a few minutes, 15, 20 minutes.
So there's a spectrum up here as well too. There's a spectrum of cannabis doctor up here as well too. And that's what we'll see down in LA. Now this doctor charging $60, a lot of the doctors are even charging $35 right now. Back around 2007, I remember when I first got my recommendation, it was around 100 and 120. But in LA, there were a lot of doctors doing things like the Skype. And there were a lot of doctors who were getting shut down because they didn't even see the patient. They would just send their nurse to do the evaluation. Snoop Dogg. Again, at this time, as more and more collectives were being opened, and each collective was trying to top each other to get more patients, we see more and more celebrities getting involved. This was Snoop Dogg, as you can tell, who is here supporting a collective called Kushmart. In the ad says, Kushmart is the shizzle. Now, a really funny story, I remember when Snoop Dogg's manager at the time actually contacted Herbal Cure, the collective I work for, and I had the most hilarious conversation with him. He was like, okay, so Mr. Snoop, or Mr. Dogg, or whatever at the time, it's... Lion. It's basically, his pitch was really, really funny. He's like, okay, so now Mr. Snoop, this is how it goes. You give him, I forget the price, but Snoop will take $10,000. He'll hang out your collective for an hour, smoke cannabis with your patients, take the chopsticks and dispense the medicine to them. And then when he's done, he can take as much cannabis as he wants. Yeah, he's like, he'll take whatever he wants, so like a pound or whatever. But that's what was really funny. Snoop Dogg's manager was actually, or whoever was representing him at the time, was actually shopping around to different collectives, trying to get him sponsoring, and that's how Snoop at the time, I guess, got his medicine. Free samples for first-time patients. Now, I'm open to recreational use of medical cannabis, personally. It's as long as someone's not hurting, others, or damaging themselves, I'm open to that. But again, with all these advertisements, with all this marketing and co-branding we're seeing, if you went to a pharmacy, would they be advertising this? Some of them do, but again, we're seeing this as obviously marketing to a certain class of patient. Hash bar upstairs. Now that's really cool. I like it that patients could be able to medicate on site. But again, what was the quality of the medicine? And during this time was when it started getting a little more chilling. That's when we start seeing a lot more robberies. And that's when we start seeing a lot more deaths. In this period of cannabis chaos between 2010 and 2013, man slain at Hollywood pot store. Second killing of the day at the marijuana dispensary. At that time, there were crews of, I don't know what we call it, robbers or gangs, who would consistently knock off the collectives. Maybe they would hit up, 3 or 4 in a night. Or maybe they would hit up 2 in a day. And a lot of times it was a simple smash and grab. Just run in with the gun, point at everyone, take the medicine, take the cash, and run out. But as at this time, it started becoming a little more scary because as a patient, as someone working in a collective, I'm there because I want to help people. But now I have to worry about getting shot. I have to worry about getting arrested. I have to worry about, the FBI coming in and taking away my livelihood and my career and my friends. It was at this time that I started understanding a little more of the seriousness of what I was doing and how working in the cannabis industry and the problems cannabis patients face, it's also a human rights issue. And maybe it's a civil rights issue because do I as a patient or an industry person have the same rights that everyone else has? Could my children be taken away from me? Could I be fired from my job? Could I have been denied the armed services? Could I be put in jail and have my family, my career, my home, my property seized because of my medical orientation? Is there medical orientation? Is there medical discrimination? Should everyone have the same medical rights no matter what medicine works for their condition? And that's when these questions and these ideas started popping into my head. It started making me see medical cannabis as not just a way to get high, but as a really big and more important issue. Now our favorite pot doc again, Sonia Patel. I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound really to talk about her so much, but she was just a really important part of the LA cannabis scene in history. I remember at the time that she hired a marketing agency, and their whole goal was to make her, like I said, the sexy pot doc. And at the time, they even came out with a fragrance for her. So you'd be reading the cannabis magazines, and it would have like, go to this collective or do this, and then it would have like, I was like, Sonia by Sonia, you know. And then you see the branding again. OG Blue Ivy, right? So we saw Snoop Dogg. We saw some people using Obama. But at this time, how can one collective top another? And this was a really interesting time in history when the strain name game started coming out. Where every time there was a politically cultural, a big cultural event or some kind of celebrity, they would then name a cannabis strain after it. Los Angeles drugstores named new strain of cannabis after Jay-Z and Beyonce's baby daughter. Hollywood dispensaries are reportedly cashing in on OG Blue Ivy medical marijuana. And I remember other names as well. You know, they'd have like OG Britney Spears or like OG this. Sherman Oaks Collective Care, always the best prices. During that time, there's a really good LA Times article about the different types of collectives that there were as far as marketing and branding. This one fits into more of they called it the granola and hippie version. Sendog and the Happy Ending Girls was a little bit more of the gangster kind of vibe. And then there was also some of the collectives like Herbal Cure, which had more of like the medical angle. Again, we're seeing more chaos. Armed robbers hit marijuana clinic in Northridge. Dispensary, 2 men shot, guard dog killed at pot shop. Officials say could be running illegally. Now, does anyone else catch that could be? This is still a time when LA City didn't even know where all the collectives were. The police department did not know where every collective was. This was a citywide game of whack-a-mole. Does anyone remember whack-a-mole or go to the arcades? You know or am I too old for that? Jeff, do you remember whack-a-mole? Okay. So at the arcade, you have a bunch of little holes, and you would have these little moles that would pop up. And you'd have like the mallet, and you knock it. As soon as you knock one down, another pops up. You knock one down. I guess it's like the old mythology about Hydra, the multi-headed beast where you cut off one head and then 2 more springs forth in its place. So at this time, as soon as the cops or LAPD or whoever would shut one down, they would just move around the corner and open up in a new place. They didn't even need to put signs up. They could just advertise. But what's the cost of dysregulation? What happens when a city isn't getting control of a big cannabis chaos like this? Lives end up getting lost. And dogs too. Okay, so now it's 2014. Actually, this is specifically more around the end of 2013. Started about 2007. So in 6 years, LA City has still not gotten control of the mess. Prop 215, which you all know was a medical cannabis law, was passed in 1996. So more than 15 years after a medical cannabis law was passed, LA City still hasn't got their act together. They have tried dozens of different ordinances. They have tried complete bans. They have tried only letting some of the good operators. They have tried many other ones as well. None of them have worked. So now it's time to try something different. And this is where we come into a voter initiative. And if you don't really know what the difference between a voter initiative and like normal regulation is, basically the entire time city council was passing the laws, trying to regulate cannabis and doing it horribly. Proposition D was a voter initiative, which means that now the people of Los Angeles can vote how they want medical cannabis regulated. And it was this time that the cannabis community started learning from their mistakes in the past. Historically, people in the cannabis industry, it was more of entrepreneurs and independent groups. There weren't really organizations of cannabis farmers or cannabis industry people, right? It's more of a black market industry. It's gray market right now. But in black market, you want more privacy, you want more secrecy. But because of that, the cannabis community wasn't united. And because of that, they're continually being taken advantage of by criminal elements and the city. But now we have a champion. And now we have organization. This was Councilman Bill Rosenthal. Does anyone know who he was or what he did for the cannabis community? No one up here really knows what he did? Okay. Well, we'll be showing a video of it. But basically, this is a very dear man. I worked with him personally. He was an LA City Council member. He was an elected official like myself, but not a local, small, grassroots one. He was a really, really big-time one who represented hundreds of thousands of people. And he could pass legislation for LA City. And he is the first cannabis patient in LA City history. I'm sorry, he was the first city council person in LA City history to actually openly use medical cannabis while in office, because he was diagnosed with cancer. This is the first time that issues come home to the politicians in LA City, because one of their own finally is a medical cannabis patient. And one of their own is having difficulty getting his medicine. Now, what was great with Bill Rosenthal is I was able to work with him, and Herbal Cure, the collective, was able to work with him. And this was a really, to me, historical time in cannabis history, because he went in LA Times and said, everybody, Herbal Cure is my collective. That's where I go to get my medicine. And if you can think of how big of a deal it is to have an elected official publicly say, hey, I support this cannabis collective, it's quite a big time. And I'm going to come back to this real quick, because there's some other people to talk about. Like, I want to talk about UFCW, the organization. But I want to focus a little more on Bill Rosenthal. I have a great video, because I really want us I know we have some industry people here. We have a lot of students here. I know we have some people interested in sociology here. And it's here where we're finally seeing what it's going to take to get the cannabis community's voice heard in politics. It takes a champion, and it takes organization. The photographer, the reporters, the members of Herbal Cure, his staff, we all were remarking about what an amazing day this was. That actual elected official will be shown, allow himself to be photographed in a cannabis collective. Pull up a quick video. Now, what we're about to see is a very, I know I'm saying the word historic a lot, but I really feel this is important, a historic time. When a councilman was able to convince all his other council members to not outright ban all the collectives, because then he couldn't get his medicine. It's a very powerful video.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. It's a very emotional moment for me. 10 years ago, I came down with diabetes. My internist, a general practitioner at St. John's, gave me a prescription for marijuana. I said, why? He says, because it'll help with the act of the problem you have details. I did that in 1996. When I met with Kamala Harris, the Attorney General of the state, the other day, she said the problem is in the details. There are no details. The state legislature has to come up with details, so we know how to do it properly. In the meantime, we have maybe 100, I don't know exactly, that have been playing by the rules, the distances we set up, the neighborhoods that make sense. Frankly, I'm upset that Obama, and I have to agree with John Walsh, gave everybody a sense they could have it, that the Mexican mafia, the Armenian mafia, and I guess there's a third mafia now, the Russian mafia, have jumped in to push their pedal, their crap, and cause even more problems. So, if I can't get marijuana, and this is medically prescribed, what do I do? And what do all the people who have health issues, who have been relying on it? And frankly, Obama did a disservice when he turned around and said, oh, well, it's okay. And they popped up. Then he brings in his attorneys and starts closing them. So he didn't get his message straight with himself. And I don't know where wrong he is, but I can say this very clearly. They both were wrong in what they did. They're helping put us in this situation here to clear it up. Let's authorize whatever that number was. They're grandfathered into this, and take a deep breath and see what the state will do. And if we can get the state to have some legislators, they'll help us with the details. We can deal with it at another day. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl.
Did anyone else kind of feel that? How emotionally important that was? I remember going to Bill's house. I was lucky enough, he's still around. Sorry, I don't mean Bill, you're still around. We love you. I just remember at that time, I was his caregiver. And I remember I would go to his house, and it was a really special time for me because we would provide him his medicine. And it's not that we just would, source his medicine from somewhere else, but we actually grew his medicine for him in West LA at our collective. And I remember at that time, it was really cool. We worked with a company called Clean Green, which is a third-party agriculture certification program. We're farmers, but we realized, how do we know our medicine is safe? We got to use standards. And Clean Green is a program that would take USDA organic standards and just put them on cannabis. Not to make it USDA certified because the federal government wouldn't allow that, but at least we know we are growing it safe. So I would go home, I was a chef, and I would make him this cannabis butter. We'd take the sweet leaf to trim, and I'd cook it for him and strain it. And his cannabis butter was the only thing that would help him sleep at night. And it's the only thing that would help him deal with the horrible cancer pain he was having in his pelvis at the time. Again, just really more good publicity from him. It was very emotional time for me to get this recognition for our work. Because again, at that time, I'm still feeling like a criminal. I just wanted to help him like I helped my other cancer patients, but I was still being treated like I was a black market and a drug dealer. But this man stood up for the cannabis community and stood up for his collective. So going back to this screen, so we see, okay, we have a voter initiative, we have a champion, we have someone who's willing to take it. Prop D did pass. And another reason why is now we're starting to see organization within the movement. USCW Local 770, the unions. Now, we know a lot of us know, like sociology, know about the history of unions a bit, how they've always classically, like the Teamsters, been able to turn out the vote and organize people. So in the cannabis community, we start seeing them partnering with them. UFCW's goal was to start incorporating the collectives. Their idea was to create the first medical cannabis union and unite the workers. And they did a really, really good job, and I'll show you a video in a second. At this time, we also see There's also another proposition, vote yes on F, which is put by a lot of the quote-unquote illegal collectives as well. We're seeing their iconography. They're using the medical iconography. And this is really where the situation in LA City is reaching a real boiling point. We don't even know how many collectives are there. We've completely lost count by the time. Around this time and before it, we're starting to see even new models of cannabis entrepreneurship. I remember delivery collectives started really popping up. And it was at this time when I remember the online collectives starting popping up. Has anyone ever seen the online collective? Or okay. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the web history of it. But at that time, people literally started selling cannabis online. There's a website called vendormaps.com, and it would literally be people saying, "Hi, I've got 3 pounds of OG Kush that I've grown. I'm looking for a collective to donate it to and get my reimbursement. Here's my phone number." And that really freaked me out. Even on Craigslist. I don't know if you guys checked a Craigslist up here and if they sell cannabis there, but people were starting to sell cannabis on Craigslist too. And oh my gosh, it was like everyone was going crazy. But they were getting away with it. And I think that really shows the strength of the cannabis entrepreneurship. But then what's happening to the cannabis farmers? Prices have pretty much, even cut more in half. And I actually did these numbers wrong, so I'm sorry. Yeah, right? Oh my gosh. Okay, hey, I'll re-edit this in the editing room. But at this time, indoor now is about 24 to 28. It's cut almost in half from 2007. A farmer was making almost twice as much. Outdoor, between 14 and 18. And these prices are really, really hurting a lot of the farmers. I do a lot of like touring and researching with other farms. I did it on this week when I came up here. And farmers are hurting. Look, we see now the 5 gram made. Cannabis is so inexpensive now, they can just give it away for free, a lot of it. And a lot of these collectives, they were still maintaining the same rates, but they were kept chiseling the farmers down and down. And this is where we see more of the economics of pot with the buyer's market, where now the middleman, the dealer, the store owner, is really starting to stick the screws in the farmer. They're making more and more and more money because there's more and more and more cannabis, the buyer's market. So I'm going to bring up another video. I want to show you what UFC Local 770 was doing. Let's see. You know what? I actually forgot it, so I'll show you at the end. Sorry about that.
So Nathan, just want to
Yes.
want to leave a little time for some Q&A. So let's.
Cool. How much time do we got?
Well, we've got about maybe 10, 15 minutes or so. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oof.
Time goes quickly.
Okay, well, you know what? So I'll just kind of wrap up the whole cannabis chaos. LA, it's still chaos. Prop D is being implemented right now, and collectives are being shut down left and right. This proposition, which was supposed to allow like safe access to collectives, the city attorneys appears to be taking a hardline approach, where even now my collective is in jeopardy, and patients may not even be able to have access to it. So, to move forward, I wanted to talk a little bit about the future and answer some questions. So let's just go through a couple slides real quick. Some possible conversation topics, the future. We can talk about the business. Fortune magazine. So obviously it's in the public consciousness. We know hemp has just become legal for pilot programs at universities. We talk about that. Moving from marijuana. How the mommy lobby and people are starting to use cannabis for children with seizures. Sativex. Cannabis pharmaceuticals are here. There are orphan trials beginning to start by the FDA for an actual cannabis pharmaceutical by a company which is owned by Bayer, I believe. Yes? And also American Herbal Products Association. So a couple of questions. Anyone have any questions? Yes, sir.
It was actually in reference to my lab.
Good.
I've talked to some of my friends up here about, I'm a healthcare practitioner, but I don't use marijuana or cannabis in my practice for fears of
Legal fears.
And so anyway, I've talked to a few of my friends who are farmers up here and about getting together with them and creating kind of a combination thing of tinctures that I use to help people with pathologies, that kind of thing.
Yes.
And combine it with the cannabis. But I don't know where really, I investigated with some lawyers and that kind of thing. But I it's not like it's Colorado where there's a legal
Where it's more clear. You don't really know how you can do that and not go to jail.
right. And so what I'm curious about is are there avenues or places that one can look for potential framework for that kind of stuff? Because when I saw that thing that Bayer was doing, I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
And as soon as I saw the Bayer, or you said it was Bayer, I thought, oh, that's why I laughed. Is they always try to get? I got some problems.
Yeah. Well, let me try to answer your question then. This gentleman is a healthcare practitioner. He was talking about using cannabis in his healthcare practice, but he doesn't really have any clear guidelines or know how to do it without going to jail. Honestly, I don't have any. The only information is that it's gray. It's that if you stay low key and stuff, you probably wouldn't get in trouble. But
Is it possible to produce that kind of thing and then talk to collectives and have them? Because the thing that there's the thing with like people making brownies and
well, I understand, but I want to answer your question. Is basically there isn't really an answer because one lawyer will tell you yes, another will tell you no, and then the judge may tell you something different. Honestly, so all I got to say is to stick around Himmer because these are questions that the Himmer and people want to know. Like, what are people asking? So thanks. Another question? Yes, miss.
What area in LA do you find the highest concentration of dispensaries?
What area? I don't have the exact stats, but at one time, Venice Beach. Everyone knows about Venice Beach? Literally, it's when you go to Venice, normally it's like tattoo shop, bong shop, tattoo shop, bong shop. At one time, it was literally, I think, 20 collectives along there.
On the strip?
Yeah, on the strip. You'd be walking along the boardwalk. In reference to my first slide, it was actually a photo of Venice Beach, but there'd be the people with the marijuana leaves saying, come on, get your card. Even if people were from out of town or from out of the country, which isn't legal, they would still give them the card because they can give them the hotel address, use that as their driver's license or whatever. And so there really became more of a pot tourism. So I think Venice Beach, also Eagle Rock downtown a little bit too. A good question. Yes, sir. And then I'll pick you.
Is the same thing happening in Orange County as well with their dispensaries that you know?
Is the same thing?
Because I heard some things about Garden Grove and having problems with dispensaries in that city.
The Garden Grove did recently have issues, but I think SD, San Diego, recently just passed a new ordinance. I don't know all the details, but if you Google San Diego medical marijuana ordinance, it should have happened in the past week or so. Yes, miss.
Do you have any idea how much of the medicine in the dispensaries in LA is indoor versus outdoor produced?
I don't really know. It honestly changed. Well, I have an idea. It changes depending upon the geography and the type of collective. The collectives that cater more towards a low-income patient, doing $35, $25 eighths, they generally will sell more outdoor because, as we saw, it was generally a little cheaper. The more high-end collectives and maybe more wealthier parts of town, they generally would stock more indoor, or concentrates. Yeah.
And then the second part is, really until legislation happens, right, or there's another clarifying voter initiative with a clear regulatory framework.
Yeah.
We aren't probably going to have the clarity, of the questions like you're asking. But I think what's interesting is you have the slide of Optic here, right? You put forward nutraceutical and herbal product guidelines, and the slide before is fair. And what that sort of pressure points mean for how legislation and future regulations go on. And in LA, was that a conversation as well when you were talking with, Measure D, and you have the city council?
Is botanical versus pharmaceutical?
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. LA City, they had no idea. This is all way bomb. You guys know more than they ever will with this short lecture. But yeah, I brought this slide because I want to talk about that. Botanical versus pharmaceutical. Will it be one or the other? Or will maybe both be able to exist in the same industry? And I guess that's a question that we'll be continually talking here about at Himmer. Real quick, I think someone over, did you, sir? Okay. You, Mr. Sociology major.
Never mind. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, you, sir.
I just wanted to know if the Cannabis Consulting Group thinks that the whole 215 medical marijuana is really a sort of acknowledged farce that's going to go away when recreational marijuana becomes legal in California.
That's a very good question. He asked if Cannabis Consulting Group feels that Prop 215 is more of a farce that will then go away when it gets more legitimate laws on the books?
Yeah, recreation.
Oh, recreation.
Recreational marijuana is the reality that 215 is just sort of a farce for.
I get it.
Realizes that, and I'm just wondering if they think at the Cannabis Consulting Group that the whole dispensary model is going to evaporate in the face of recreational marijuana.
That's a really good question. So the gentleman, how much time? We got a couple.
Yeah, we have a few more minutes. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Gentleman asked a very good question. What's going to happen to the dispensary model? What's going to happen to recreation and medical? And was Prop 215 just kind of the joke to get farce joke to kind of get cannabis into California allowed to happen? I do not speak for Cannabis Consulting Group. There are a whole bunch of experts and scientists and got their own opinions. They're sponsoring my talk. But if I could give this my own interpretation of this culmination of all the advice I hear. I guess the slide could answer it. It's like a lot of money is starting to come into cannabis. Pharmaceutical companies, investors, Wall Street, private equity funds. These people have money, they have the infrastructure to already in place. Even agriculture. And I will make sure to answer your question. I kind of want to incorporate it into a larger discussion. It's what's going to happen for the Humboldt cannabis farmer right now. Let's talk about their future a little bit, and then I'll bring it back to that. How is a Humboldt cannabis farmer going to compete in the market? Cannabis farming, really famously kind of began here. There's a real prestige. There's a real, I really believe, pride in that. But cannabis farmers aren't really united right now. I know there's some organizations like Emerald, but GW Pharmaceuticals, they've got the labs, they've got the scientists, they've got the connections, they've got the lobbyists. They've got the money.
And they're in a foreign country that allows it.
They're in a foreign country that allows it, and now they're in U.S. with FDA trials. So how is that going to affect the cannabis farmer? What about agriculture? A lot of Humboldt cannabis farmers are good, but what's going to happen when you have a tomato farmer or a strawberry farmer who's been doing it for years and has the equipment, has the farm, who has all everything set up, and then in 1 second can just plant cannabis and turn it over? I believe these are really important questions about the economy of Humboldt that we need to start discussing among ourselves, because we know about green rushes and gold rushes and ghost towns. What's going to happen to Humboldt when the other states start taking away business? When the other counties start taking away business? These are things we got to ask. And personally, to answer your question, I think 215, was just the best way at the time to get cannabis in. What's going to happen with the dispensary model? I know it's going to be a really intense fight. I know those pharmaceutical companies in big ag, they're going to be throwing money at it, and I think the cannabis community is going to really start uniting against. I think it's these sorts of competition. I think competition is really going to decide this. It's going to make the cannabis growers actually start uniting and being able to do it. So if cannabis farmers can get together and unite, then I think we can have a dispensary model. But if everyone's still in it for themselves, like traditionally not everyone in it for themselves, but if it's still more, lone wolf in it, then it's not going to work. Does that kind of answer your question? My opinion? Yeah. Again, there's not a lot of answers right now, guys. It's still a gray market. It's still vague.
But again, to that comment about 215 being a farce for the use of cannabis, at least it allowed it to come out in the open, which is one good thing. Secondly, if it's such a farce, I don't understand why the federal government actually has the patent on cannabidiol and THC. And they did this back in 2006, I think it was. In 2003, they actually patented, the U.S. government and the DEA owns the patent on cannabidiol. So, it is a medicine. And there are definitely people that...
And I believe this gentleman wasn't saying that necessarily his opinion, he's just kind of, right? You're just like, do you think it was a farce?
The dispensary model, while it does serve some people legitimately, I think everyone realizes that the majority of people with 215 prescriptions are recreational users. And I'm saying at that point, doesn't recreation make more sense than the dispensary model?
Oh, okay, then I think I misunderstood your question then. I'm sorry. He's saying, does a recreational model of having it maybe sold in stores recreationally, maybe... Okay, so does the Washington or Colorado model maybe make a little more sense than a Prop 215? Then I agree with you 100% with that. Because Prop 215, we're still trying to figure out how cities can regulate with it. It's like what? Like cancer patients are supposed to be dragging their shovels and growing the medicine themselves? Like that's ridiculous. I think a recreation model, or at least a pharmacy model, where you can go to a pharmacy, makes a lot of sense. Even in California, doctors are not allowed to tell their patients where to get cannabis. I remember reading the California Medical Board guidelines, and they said, as a medical doctor, you cannot tell the patient where they can get cannabis or you'll be in conflict with federal law. And what kind of insanity is this? It's like we're sending our sickest people to the street to get medicine, or tell them they got to get a pitchfork and grow it themselves. It's obviously this doesn't make any sense, but people just keep on playing with it, the psychosis of it. But
I think we have time for one more quick question, and then if there are any more folks can come up afterwards for briefly. But is there another question?
Great. I'm sorry, he had his hand up for a while. Can we talk afterward? Thank you.
That question is a quick question. I was just curious how you got your data for the prices.
Great.
Also, another part to that question, how the economics is being studied right now currently as far as fluctuations in prices and stuff like that.
See, what a great question is this. How do we get the data for this cannabis economics? And then what was the second part, like how to learn more about the data?
How it's currently being analyzed, studied by
How is this cannabis economic data currently being analyzed? Eric, are we going to start analyzing this stuff?
We're working on that right now.
At the only marijuana institute in the United States. This may be the only place in the United States where we can start getting legitimate cannabis economic data. So, I'm not exaggerating, but so that's why, so let me try to, I'll answer the second part and then I'll wrap it up. Yeah, well, this is what great is about running a helping run a dispensary in LA is that, we know the prices because we were there the whole time. So, I've talked with the owner who saw more pounds of cannabis than anyone I know. And also, even though we grew most of it, I said, what were the prices? And he told me. So that's what's great about CCG, Cannabis Consulting Group, is that not only do they have academic and university experts, but they're really partnering with industry professionals and like professional dispensary owners to really form that nice hybrid of academic and universities, but with professional industry people. So I'd honestly maybe check out their website and try to stick around HIMR a little bit and try to get involved with some of this economic studies, because I think it's fascinating. Okay, so can I just spend 1 minute wrapping it up?
Yeah.
Okay, so I really hope you guys enjoyed my presentation. It's my whole goal was just try to educate everyone and just give them a little snapshot of what my life was like in LA. And it's personally something I just really like to share with you guys is that I really love Humboldt. It's you know, I went to school here for a bit, and I really love in supporting farmers. As a chef, I worked with farmers for years. I'm a farmer, you know, internship. But I have these really deep concerns for the economy of Humboldt and for the skill sets for farmers. You've got all these great cannabis farmers, but what's going to happen, like I said, when they're up against a tomato farmer, a professional ag farmer, or they start coming up against big pharma? What's going to happen when investor money keeps going to Colorado and Washington when Wall Street is investing a lot of infrastructure? Are these Humboldt farmers going to start upgrading their skill sets? Like, are there going to be like actual cannabis certifications and accreditations where people can actually professionally be a cannabis farmer and have some type of a, you know, career in it? And I just think these are very important questions to ask, not only about public health and safety of cannabis, what about our economy of Humboldt, and how are we going to keep Humboldt still the #1 cannabis producing county? So I hope everyone thinks about these questions and sticks around HIMR and really supports this institute, because again, this is the first marijuana institute in the United States. This is historical, and we really got to support this. So thank you for your time.